So with that, I will pass it on to Matthew. We're really excited to hear about the work you're doing at TreeAid, specifically around your afforestation reforestation project. So Matthew, I'll pass it over to you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. So good afternoon and good morning, everyone. My name is Matthew Ashpole, Nature-Based Solutions and Carbon Manager at TreeAid. I lead carbon quantification at our organization and wider project design and certification processes as well. So I'm here to give you all a bit of perspective from TreeAid on how we have navigated the push for higher integrity in the market, the challenges that we've faced, and the opportunities that we see going forward. So TreeAid is a primarily development-focused organization linking the impacts of climate change with the ongoing humanitarian crises of poverty and hunger across the dry lands of Africa. We started in 1987 with our head office in Bristol, England, and our regional HQ is now in Burkina Faso, with other country offices in Mali, Niger, Ghana, Ethiopia, and Senegal. We've planted roughly 32 million trees to date, restored nearly 240,000 hectares, and supported nearly 4 million people directly. Our long-standing focal areas have been forest restoration, agroforestry, and economic development of enterprises through non-timber forest products. And we work through three core layers of society to enact change, empowering individual families through things like green jobs and cook stoves, empowering communities as a whole through village savings and loans associations, and empowering systems by focusing on creating an enabling environment for forest protection and restoration through formalized land tenure systems. Next slide, please. So right up until roughly 2021, our restoration model was exclusively through grant-based financing. During this time, we refined and perfected a forest governance style approach, which is relatively synonymous with participatory forest management, if you're more familiar with that term. This approach identifies degraded forest sites, establishes a management plan and bylaws, and works with the community to officially recognize their rights to manage the forest, and provides them with the tools and reignites the knowledge required to restore those resources. If you'd like to know more about TreeAid's forest governance approach, I would direct you to our forest governance paper, authored by my colleagues Annie Schultz, Jasmine Dorney, and Alexei Somputu. Since we brought carbon finance on board, we've since framed opportunities with the restoration first logic. Which financing vehicle is the most appropriate for the scale of restoration required? So that's carbon versus grant-based. Would this be additional given the work already completed? And what systems do we need to put in place for the project to thrive? Tontenga is our best example of it. The project title translates to Our Land in Moray, which is Burkina Faso's indigenous language. And this was built on our larger forest governance project running since 2007. Thanks to the systems put into place by that forest governance approach, we were able to work with Earthshot Labs to get this project to be the first ever registered under VM47, which is a massive achievement for us. And we are very proud to have set that standard for quality under this methodology. And in what many see as a bit of an underdog of a geography, not receiving the same climate finance investment as other African countries. We also have our Olympic Forest projects, which is cross-border projects under Plan Vivo 5, covering Mali and Senegal. It's much smaller scale, and we hope to increase that in the next few years. We recently received pilot funding to kick off our sister project to Tontenga, called TC Tenga, which means the land of trees in Mampruli, spanning a few localities in northern Ghana and focusing on restoring forest resources in the White Volta River Basin. Between them, they have about 4 million trees planted to date and expect roughly 7 million tons of CO2 to be issued over 40 years. Next slide, please. So now we're coming on to the core topic that's relevant to this webinar, how we, as a community-based development actor, navigated the core carbon principles and the VM47 methodology specifically. Governance first. Clearly, this term comes second nature to us based on our forest governance approach. And we really value the ICVCM's sub-principle goals of tracking, transparency, and robust validation and verification. But these did cause some sticking points for us in terms of the volume of work required to prove these elements of the methodology, forcing people like Alexei, our project coordinator for Tontenga, to spend all day overseeing tree planting, then uploading data from the field when he gets back to the office, and also properly digesting and understanding the PDD and questions from the auditor to ensure that we were getting the correct local context. As far as emissions impacts, we are completely aligned with. Demonstrating high integrity, additionality, permanence, and robust quantification are expectations that all VCM actors should expect to conduct. However, one observation that sticks out regarding permanence is the challenge of satisfying that 100-year permanence goal with a community-based project, wherein a contract of participation, in whatever format that is, needs to cover sometimes 2 generations worth of chiefs or more, which is one point that we definitely have struggled with during our project development. Sustainable developments, I think, is where we thrive in terms of our project design being centered around community benefits and long-term stewardship. Our projects have a core goal of poverty alleviation as a key performance indicator, and our projects always aim for an equitable benefit sharing mechanism achieved through free, prior, informed consent. This relates, however, to one thing I'll come on to soon, which is balancing this with feasibility inside the market conditions that are present. We all have access to the knowledge for best practice, but this doesn't always align with financing available to us, even in the voluntary carbon market. Next slide, please. So as a principal slide for my presentation, what does TreeAid see as its main opportunities and challenges in the VCM? And what can we, standards, and the market do as a whole to support community-based developers? Starting with the barriers, we found that pilot funding to establish a project, even if you already have nearly 2 decades of historical activity in the sites and a strong framework, can still leave you stretched to satisfy the community engagement, registration fees, organizational manpower required, and also get the project implemented while preparing for audit and registration. During that process, the methodologies do ask a completely different suite of skills to what non-carbon development actors likely have on staff to cover things like the performance benchmarking, ex-ante modeling, and the skills that you likely do have on hand to cover field campaigns in this project type. You have to conduct nearly exponentially more of it. So this can put pressures on the team that you may not have been aware of beforehand. Broadly now, we have very extensive due diligences from, I think, every step of the project design and implementation, which is a shift in what we experienced when establishing Tontenga in 2023. And financial models, when discussing with investors, are not necessarily shifting with the demands. When acquiring either seed funding or pre-purchase agreements with the funds being used to run the project, we haven't felt that CCP boost come through just yet. Though it is early days, I think we could do with more movement towards more modest IRRs in the interest of higher quality project delivery. So onto opportunities. We would like to see more projects be given that opportunity to pilot their project in a meaningful way with fully costed and healthy seed funding, which allows you to de-risk the project for the bigger actors to seek offtake deals, further de-risking the project for everyone involved. We would like to see simplified options in MRV and generally tech solutions for things like dynamic baselining, ex-ante modeling, to increase accessibility in the market under high quality standards, thinking of solutions like the jurisdictional mapping approach that VM48 has undertaken, but with a more agile and global rollout. Lastly, we want to see investors and buyers turn their attention to the underdogs of the market and support projects in the Great Green Wall, which, as you can see from our paper co-authored by myself, Rebecca Lauriciano, and the World Economic Forum, has been demonstrated to have massive untapped potential. So I would like to conclude just to discuss quickly what's next for TreeAid in the VCM. We want to scale up our own work through a multi-country portfolio. We want more projects that strengthen land tenure and forest governance with equitable benefit sharing, more transparency, and we want to offer non-profit technical support to small and medium-sized organizations who wish to break into the carbon market, but do not have the funds or are uneconomical to be supported by the larger technical consultancies, supporting real grassroots community-led projects to become the norm in the VCM. Thank you very much for your time, and any questions at the end?
Thanks so much, Matthew. I think you really helped illustrate just how resource intensive and all of the considerations and work that goes into developing a project anyway, but especially with the added rigor of the methodologies with CCP approval. For now, we'll move on to our next speaker, who is Joe Anderson at CarbonTanzania.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you, everyone. And Yeah, thanks, Matthew. You've laid the groundwork very well for me to hopefully talk about the other main methodology that has been identified by Alex. CarbonTanzania, if you don't know us, I'm the co-founder and I look after the finance and sales for the company. But we started as a very small conservation effort in Tanzania over 15 years ago, and essentially set the business up to deal with this wicked problem of finding a way to fund local communities, and compensate them for their actions to protect forests. We are focused on REDD, as I said, so I'm going to talk today about the challenges and opportunities, hopefully, of developing REDD projects mostly, and also transitioning REDD projects so that the credits that they issue are eligible for CCP approval. We have 3 verified projects under certification at the moment. One is certified by the Plan Vivo Foundation, and 2 are certified under Verar's VM7 methodology. We are then also developing a further project from scratch, which will eventually issue credits under the VM48 methodology. So what we're talking about today, and what I'll hopefully be giving some insights on, are the challenges and opportunities of both developing the one project, at least that we're focused on, and transitioning 2 others. Next slide, please. I mean, a lot of us hopefully know, some of you might already know, we have a lot of challenges to both develop and transition these projects to these new methodologies, specifically in our case to VM48. The responsibilities of CarbonTanzania as a project developer here require us to plan for these new methodologies, think about the requirements of the new methodology, and to analyze all sorts of things from the carbon accounting areas that are going to be used, thinking about potentially enhanced biomass measurements, and looking at the options for what we need to do in terms of both the technical and the activity-based interventions that we need to fulfill the requirements of these new methodologies. And it all requires us to essentially revalidate the entire project, so not a insignificant undertaking for anyone who knows what it's like to develop carbon projects. This almost certainly, again, as we already know, will lead to haircuts in the number of credits that will probably be issued from even the same project areas, based on new baselining modeling that we're going to have to do. So there's a lot to go into there. I can't obviously go through every single technical detail. So we're going to move on to the next slide, please. I'm going to talk a little bit and focus very much on the practical issues of either developing or transitioning. And for us, the focus, as Matthew actually alluded to, is really understanding the role of our communities and making sure that everything we put in place is aligned with their priorities and their socioeconomic livelihood needs. It's called FPIC. This is the term that's thrown around. What does it really mean? Well, it's a very sort of specific process which has to be tailored to the context in which you're working, and the reality is it's ongoing. The transitioning, in our case, 2 projects, or developing new one, just emphasizes how important it is to continue to be engaged with communities. For us, this means ensuring that financial flows will be consistent. It means that we need to make communities aware that this transition is happening without obviously introducing incredibly complex concepts, but being open and transparent that there is a change happening. And then beyond that, FPIC, in a sense, can be seen as going even higher to higher levels of government, where people need to be made aware that there could be changes, finances may change, issuances are going to change. And to that end, we've worked very hard with our government partners and various strategic partners in the space to help them understand what's coming. Governments have to, for these jurisdictional programs, commission organizations to generate jurisdictional data. Data service providers are contracted, and they're producing what we call risk maps, which help us to develop the baselines for this new methodology. Again, this is all speaking to the jurisdictional accounting of carbon, which is seen by the market as a much more a higher integrity way of making climate claims. And working with the government is very important because they need to be brought into the process and pretty much own the results of that if it's going to be meaningful and applicable to our work. So yeah, the point here, FPIC at every level, it never stops. Next slide, please. So what activities, does it involve practically? Again, huge amounts of things we could talk about, but what we do need to think about to account for some of the haircuts that we might expect in issuance, to account for some of the perturbation, let's call it, at the project level, we might want to expand our carbon accounting areas on the ground. That again requires consultations with the villages, our communities, whoever's involved. These new methodologies can include post-deforestation plots, which weren't in VM7. And we could be adding ARR instances even in the same landscape. That would be a great way of balancing out some of the potential loss in issuance and therefore revenues. Combined with that, we're very focused on doing, again, part of the FPIC, I suppose you'd call it, but much more specific. To make these decisions, we need to have focused learning events with community groups and the local government. We've been doing this in both of our sites at the moment, and we hope that will lay the groundwork for a successful transition. Last slide, please. Big question, which was alluded to already by Matthew, is the cost of this. Who's going to bear the cost? It's not cheap. Will the costs fall on the communities? We don't think that's really fair. Should project developers be expected to bear the cost? These are difficult questions to answer. So the availability of capital and the terms of that, which we often ask in these situations, how are we going to access that, and what will be available to help that transition? And of course, related to that, we all know that having a very clear signal from the market that the credits that will be produced and potentially issued under these new methodologies will have a much higher attractive price point for the market. If we get that clear indication, then of course perhaps getting capital to pay for all this transition work would be easier. So that's kind of a big question mark for me at the end. So I think I'll stop there, and obviously we'll be waiting for questions at the end. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Joe. I think we really appreciate your explanation and how much detail you go into in terms of the relationship management and investment and work that you do with communities to work closely with them, make sure those benefit sharing mechanisms are in place and really benefiting them, and what the implications are of having worked with them for many years when you were developing your project initially, and now with this transitioning existing projects or new ones, really updating the understanding and the work you do with them, and trying to navigate how that these costs that you have to bear the brunt of, where those land. I think it's a really important thing to understand and keep in mind as we're trying to navigate the development of these projects and costs associated when it may take some time to see the carbon finance truly. So thank you for that. With that, we'll get to our last speaker. We will hear from Thomas Jambra. Thomas, please go ahead. Thank you so much. You're muted, Thomas. Sorry.
Thanks for that, Charlotte. Thank you very much, Charlotte, for that. And thanks to my co-panelists here, Matthew and Joe, putting the perspective from the private sector here. I'm coming from the government sector. And just to start off by thanking you for the invitation to contribute to this timely conversation on the core carbon principles, their influence on the voluntary carbon market, And Ghana specifically welcomes the shifts towards high integrity, transparent, scalability in climate finance. Very much pleased to share insights from our experience with jurisdictional red flags, which continues to evolve with clear focus on environmental rigor and social inclusion. I'll start off by sharing Ghana's red flags journey over the years. Ghana began its red flags journey with subnational pilots under the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility, which culminated in the successful delivery of resource-based payments. Our commitment to inclusive development is reflected in our benefit sharing model, where 69% of carbon revenues are distributed to forest communities. Joe mentioned, for instance, the communities are key to whatever is done. In Ghana, we have 69% of the carbon revenues going to communities. That's empowering local actors and reinforcing climate justice. But today, we believe that our transition to the architecture for red flags transactions, that's the ACTRIs, marks a decisive move towards high integrity jurisdictional crediting. Ghana's trees concepts, approval, and robust monitoring, reporting, and verification systems affirm our readiness to participate in a market that values credibility, and we are on track to becoming the first African nation to be issued with the first trees credits. We believe that with CCP approval, that leads to raising the market for market credibility. The introduction of CCPs, we believe, has shifted market dynamics by sharpening the focus on the integrity and environmental soundness. While this may reduce the supply of eligible credits, that's temporarily because of we realized from the presentation of Alex, it creates a distinct opportunity for jurisdictions like Ghana, whose programs already meet many of the stringent criteria. Our alignment, especially with the ACTRIs, position us to generate CCP compliant credits, attracting buyers that demand high quality and impact credit. I would, as done by the earlier speakers, I would kind of come up with Ghana's opportunities in CCP-aligned carbon markets. Here I have 5 of them. The market differentiation. Here, we believe that Ghana's jurisdictional programs stand apart from fragmented project-level approaches by offering national scale credibility that is anchored in policy adherence and MRV transparency. As I would usually put it, the indirect causes of deforestation and forest degradation, that's what we are trying to fight here, that's leading to climate change, spans across multiple sectors. That's from jurisdictional perspective, you can now be able to achieve policy coherence. Again, we believe that CCP compliant credits present premium products which appeals to buyers seeking integrity and durability. 2, we are looking at policy coherence and adherence here. Policy coherence and adherence. Our red flag strategy integrates seamlessly with national climate and land use policies, ensuring that carbon finance supports development projects with the sustainable development in mind. And we believe that jurisdictional implementation mitigates risks of land use conflicts and strengthens institutional governance for long-term success. The third point I would like to make about Ghana's opportunity in the CCP-aligned carbon market is private sector engagement. Companies, which I see most companies here, are increasingly aligned with science-based targets and ESG standards. Ghana's CCP-ready credit signal reliability and social responsibility, positioning us to attract private investment and corporate offsets demand. This also creates space for local enterprises and cooperatives to thrive within the sustainable supply chain, especially in cocoa, with the EUDR, for instance, coming in as soon as possible. The fourth point here I would like to make is scalability, nesting, and regional leadership with systems already in place in Ghana. We are poised to scale REDD+ to other ecological zones. Currently, we have it in the high forest zone of Ghana. We are poised to scale it up to the mangroves and the savannas, while sharing best practices across Africa as well. The last point for me is key, and that was alluded to by Joe in his presentation. That's enhanced co-benefits and SDG integration. Ghana's REDD+ programs deliver far-reaching co-benefits, including biodiversity conservation, gender empowerment, climate-smart agriculture, and livelihood diversification. These contributions support the sustainable development goals and elevate the value of our carbon assets. But one key enabler in all of this has been the ability to understand the language of all stakeholders. It's like the analogy of a 6 and a 9, depending on where one stands. One will say it's a 6, the other will say it's a 9. You see, we have lots of stakeholders with different approaches and objectives, but when it comes to jurisdictional approach and who would want to work towards a common goal, you're able to, it takes a longer time to understand and appreciate them. But once people begin to understand and there's a common goal and language, you realize that people begin to come together. And that has been the case of Ghana. We started the REDD+ process in 2008, but it took a longer time putting in terms these frameworks, bringing all of these stakeholders together before we were able to achieve the carbon payments. One other key hurdle or challenge that I believe practically we want to mention here today is that all of these take a lot of time. Let me use the arteries as an example, which we are currently doing validation and verification for. The standard is so strong, not only on the what has been produced, that's not only on the carbon credits, but it's on the how the carbon credit has been produced. Joe mentioned, for instance, ethic. What are the indicators for engaging the community? Did you ensure free, prior, informed consent? How did you go about it? So such rigorousness takes a lot of time to prove, and that's a header that I believe I need to mention here today. How you've engaged the communities, basically validating and verifying the safeguards measures that have been put in place. I would want to end on this note that Ghana's jurisdictional REDD+ experience illustrates integrity, inclusivity, and national ownership that can coexist and thrive within the voluntary carbon markets. And we believe that RCCP standards reshape the supply landscape. Countries with robust systems, visionary leadership like Ghana are positioned not only to participate, but to lead in this. We are open to questions and answers to give further details and clarifications subsequently. Thank you very much. We look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thomas. I think it's really wonderful to hear your perspective in Ghana, and you really just highlight how important it is to have this institutional knowledge at the government level, government-led and driven in terms of jurisdictional programs, because so much of the development and future of the carbon market, the voluntary carbon market, and other international compliance markets has to really be a partnership between all of these stakeholders, particularly governments. So it's really helpful to understand how Ghana is developing your jurisdictional program and how the new developments of CCP impact that. I do think it's important to note that jurisdictional programming, the art trees, was just approved, so there isn't an existing transition that needs to be made compared to the work that TreeAid and CarbonTanzania are having to do to register new projects or transition existing projects. So there is an interesting difference there in terms of how that impacts jurisdictional programming versus other project-based developers.